Welcome, one and all, to the NFL Draft Breakdown Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Cox. With me tonight, my co-host, Justin Higdon. Justin, how's it going, man?
It's going well. We started last week. We announced that we were giving away the prospect previews for free to subscribers. We've had a great response. I want to thank everybody who's subscribing, new and old listeners, and everybody who's requested a prospect preview. And if you haven't got one for some reason and you did request me, reach out to me via email or Twitter, please let me know, and I'll make sure to rectify that situation as soon as possible. Also, for our listeners tonight, Seth, I know that the hot takes were really one of our most popular segments of the show, dating back to the Draft Savages days. And we've kind of got away from that in recent shows because we were talking to people about their previous draft boards and things like that, doing these prospect previews. So I wanted to kick tonight off with a hot take, a blast from the past, okay? So I'm kicking off with a hot take, and this is from Josh Norris, at Josh Norris, of course, from Roto World Draft. He said he was replying to our buddy Matt Miller. I could definitely be wrong, but I think Blake Sims will surprise you in Mobile. Blake Sims, of course, was the quarterback for Alabama 2 years ago. He was in the 2015 draft. And then NFL Philosophy, at NFL Philosophy, Joe Bussell replied to Josh, "Shh, Sims is a guy I need more film on, but I get the feeling I'm going to like him." Josh replied, "He's my number 3 quarterback." We know at this point, first of all, I want to say Seth and I were not ever high on Blake Sims. We laughed at this take then, and we're laughing at it now. No disrespect intended, although Joe does have me blocked, as I've mentioned on the show before. But Blake Sims, of course, wasn't drafted and didn't make a camp, and I don't know where he is right now. I don't even think he's in the CFL. So part of that is how bad that these quarterback classes have been lately, and another part of it was just like, no, dude, Blake Sims was never the number 3 quarterback in any class.
And we've talked about this before. A lot of people want to get out in front, right? Like they want to be the one that called Carson Wentz's rise. They want to be the one that saw the Blake Bortles rise. In the same vein, people also will beat their take into the ground. I see a lot of Teddy Bridgewater love-hate on Twitter.
Absolutely.
Teddy was a universal first-round talent, I think, by every draft guy I know and saw. I mean, I don't think I saw a single draft like day 2, day 3 type of guy. And people act like him being a good NFL quarterback is, the frog T emoji. Like this, look at what I got with this evaluation. It's like, I'm pretty sure that was a universal belief. In fact, if anything, most people thought he was going to take the NFL by storm. And he has yet to do that. He's a good NFL quarterback. I mean, he is one of the guys that you want and that you can build a team around. But yeah, I mean, I seem to remember a lot of people thought he was, the next Aaron Rodgers or something of that nature.
Yeah, and you guys aren't going to care about this. Seth and I are part of this fantastic Dynasty Fantasy League that's run by Jeremy Hyde, who contributes to Draft Breakdown. He's one of the nicest guys, one of the excellent evaluators in the draft. And not a lot of people know about Jeremy, but we do this league, and I want nothing more than for Teddy Bridgewater to be amazing because I drafted him in the developmental draft like years ago for our league, and he just hasn't been a great fantasy quarterback. So I kind of poked fun at him. But yeah, I think most people really thought that Bridgewater was going to be a first-round pick, maybe a second-round pick if they were really worried about the frame or the hand size. But I think everybody thought that he was going to be a starter. It is funny when people tweet the frog T emojis about Bridgewater because I don't think anybody was super down on him, and only anonymous scouts saying that he wasn't some like face of the franchise. That was the most negative thing that you would hear about him, and I don't necessarily even know what that means. So it's just there was just kind of these like generic, not too harsh criticism of him, and it feels like people are really defensive about him. But as far as Blake Sims, and Seth, I wrote an article for Revenge of the Birds, the site that Seth and I both work on and write for, SB Nation site, and I wrote about Mason Rudolph from Oklahoma State, and I think that this guy has a legitimate chance of becoming a first-round pick. So if anybody wants to jump on my hot take and maybe throw this back in my face a couple of years ago, go to Revenge, or a couple of years from now, go to Revenge of the Birds and read that and clipboard it. And then if Mason Rudolph completely flops this year, you can throw this back in my face, because this is an equal opportunity hater hour.
Oh, absolutely. We pick on ourselves half the time. It's just that, we haven't fired off too many takes right now, especially like myself after taking over an NFL site. I just, I haven't had time to jump in with both feet right now. Let's get into.
Well, if anybody ever really wants to get me, just look up my Johnny Manziel tweets. I mean, you can roast me on that for days.
Johnny Manziel, I think we both were high on like Tyler Wilson. I mean, we're not embarrassed by and that was, I mean.
Geno Smith, as we've talked about many times.
Yeah, I mean, we do an entire summer segment on this. Like, this is not something we try to shy away from. Like, we are 110% okay with being bad and having these takes, because you know what? That's the only way you get better, is learning. So, speaking of mistakes, let's get to the mistakes we'll be making in the SEC this year. And we'll start out with the NFL feeder program, the Alabama Crimson Tide. They're basically, at this juncture, have turned into a minor league NFL team. And I say that half jokingly. They're a very talented team. They produce very talented players year in and year out. This group is no different. Starts with Jonathan Allen up front. A lot of people were surprised he didn't enter the draft this year. When you end up with 12 sacks and then don't enter the draft, I think a lot of people ask the question why, right?
Yeah, and why is because he's a really big dude. He's almost 300 pounds as he's listed right now. And he kind of projects more as an interior guy, or, I don't know that he's got the length that teams really would want in like a 5 technique, on a three-man defensive front. So you've got a player who's 6'3", 294. Honestly, I mean, Allen's numbers were really good, and he had some really impactful plays throughout the year. But I was kind of surprised that he went back, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's not a first-round pick, because the way I always looked at him, I was projecting him more in the day 2 range as a player who I don't feel like he's that explosive edge rusher that's going to have that great first step that's going to produce a ton of sacks from the outside on the pro level. And I'm more, he does have a lot of closing power, and he can finish plays. He's a very good player, but I didn't think of him as a first-round pick, and I think he might have got a memo that said he's not a first-round pick, and that's why he went back. He's going to be he's a 4-year senior, so he's not going to be extraordinarily old or anything like that. He's probably going to be about 22 years old. I don't have an exact birth date on him, but he's a productive guy. I think he's going to be a player who fits well into a rotation, but I think his future is going to be inside in a 4-man front.
And when you look at, the Alabama team, it starts on the defense, and from there, we have a couple interesting guys. Ryan Anderson was a former 4-star recruit. He's on the smaller side at 6'2", about 250, but he's got a couple disciplinary actions already against him, and only 10.5 sacks in his career, 42 games. I know sacks don't always matter, but they matter on this podcast. So he's a guy that does he get drafted, or is the lack of productivity plus the two incidents at Alabama make him a guy you look at later?
I think he's going to be drafted. I think our guy Justice is high on Ryan Anderson, or at least relatively so. When you see a player that's 6'2", 253, then the way my mind works on these edge rushers is I'm automatically wondering about his arm length, because 6'2" is just about in the below average to just average range of height for an edge player. And then the arm length can really vary at that height. And we know that can be more crucial, at least in terms of how NFL teams value guys when we're talking about edge player. And we also look at Anderson being not only a guy who has a couple of red flags, he's a fifth-year player, and he's kind of been a rotational type of player with them. So, like you said, he doesn't have the super high sack numbers. And then we also look at edge players from Alabama. Adrian Hubbard immediately comes to mind, who, as a redshirt sophomore, seemed like he was on track to be a high draft pick, and then he ultimately, I think, goes undrafted. Or he was a very late round pick at the very best. But so you wonder about these guys. I think Anderson is a player to watch, but I don't know where he's going to go. I think right now I would project him into day 3 range.
Like we said, there's going to be a ton of prospects for Alabama. So we're going to kind of motor through these. Garrett Dieter, is he a draftable player to you?
I don't know. He's a graduate transfer from Bowling Green, and he was super productive, but only 11 yards per catch in the MAC, and that kind of thing raises an alarm bell for me. But he is a big guy, and he did make some spectacular one-handed touchdown catches. He is an older prospect. He'll be 24 in February. I think he is the type of player who could go undrafted, but then make a roster or practice squad.
Reuben Foster is a talented linebacker. 5-star recruit in 2013. These Bama linebackers, though, interior, off ball, whatever you want to call them, I don't know. They're hit and miss.
Yeah.
What do we think of Reuben Foster? Is he a guy that hits, or is he going to be another guy that is kind of just a rotational, hangs around for a while?
I don't have the tweets, but I saw some tweets that said that Reuben Foster was better than Reggie Ragland, and I never agreed with that. And then we saw Ragland go on day 2, which I thought was the right area for him. And unfortunately, Ragland's hurt his knee. That wasn't something that we could have really projected, because he didn't have that kind of issue in college. The best footnote about Reuben Foster is that he committed to Alabama despite the fact that he already had an Auburn tattoo on his arm. So that's one of the fun fact stories. That's one of the things that you'll get from our prospect previews. Subscribe to the show, and I'll send you a copy. We're going to probably still do that for the next couple of weeks.
Robert Foster, wide receiver, he's got 16 catches in 12 games. Is he a player that makes a jump this year? I can't see him being, he's a redshirt junior. He's probably going back for his senior season, right? Well, his redshirt season.
Yeah, you would think so. But he had 10 catches last year, but he only played 2.5 games. So maybe he all of a sudden starts producing. But he's just a player that I put on this list because Alabama receivers. I remember Kevin Norwood a couple of years ago getting drafted, and I thought that he was not really a draftable player, and he hasn't really amounted to anything. So you just look at a guy like Foster. He doesn't really pique my interest on paper or from the little film that I've seen so far.
Deshaun Hand, another 5-star recruit. Most of these guys are 4- and 5-star recruit. An undersized interior defensive lineman from Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who I think could end up being a 5 technique type player. 6'4", about 280, and he was. I always like these linemen on both offensive and defensive lines that were very successful wrestlers in high school, because I feel like they're just super scrappy, and you need that. And then you have a guy like Hand who is going to project, I think, pretty well athletically too. So another guy who has a true sophomore, he was kind of rotational and had only 3 sacks last year. But the production that he's had in the amount of time that he's played, I feel like is pretty solid up to this point. And I'm hoping that he has a bigger role this year, because he was, I think, the top recruit in the nation, or one of the top 2 or 3 recruits in the nation the year he was recruited in 2014.
From there, we go to O.J. Howard. I think we were all shocked he didn't come out this year, especially after the national championship game where he was the breakout star. I think he had over 200 yards receiving. He hasn't put up the catch and the fantasy numbers that everyone expected, but he's an excellent blocker, and he's a phenomenal athlete. I mean, outside of staying injury-free, what more do you need to see from a guy like O.J. Howard?
Yeah, I don't think there's too much more you need to see from him. I've seen some people criticize his blocking, but I think he's a pretty good blocker, at least compared to other tight ends. And certainly Alabama uses him as a blocker frequently. I see Alabama players get nitpicked on blocking a lot, and if it's a running back like Derrick Henry last year, or a guy like O.J. Howard, yes, they're not going to make every single block because they're not offensive linemen. But if they can do enough of the job, and then they succeed as they do because they're good runners in Henry's case, or receivers in Howard's case, I just think that it's kind of a nitpicky type of thing. And for Howard, I was surprised that he went back, because, like you said, he had that explosive, just incredibly productive national championship game. He really burst onto the scene. Part of my criticism of him before that was that he wasn't super productive. And I thought he improved a lot last year from what I had seen the year before. I was pretty down on him as a sophomore. I felt like he wasn't displaying good enough hands or playing well enough as a receiver to kind of make up for any shortcomings he had as a blocker. Last year, I think he took that step, and I think he will be a top 75 pick at the very least.
I'm calling my shot. First hot take of the year. O.J. Howard, barring injury, goes in the top 20.
Wow. So, okay. Yeah. Bookmark this one.
I'm calling a shot. Marlon Humphrey, redshirt sophomore. So I was interested to see why you put him on this list.
Because he was a starter as a redshirt freshman, and I think some people thought that he was the best defense back on Alabama last year as a redshirt freshman. Marlon Humphrey also has that NFL pedigree that NFL teams seem to value. His father was Bobby Humphrey, I'm old enough to remember Bobby Humphrey as a running back for the Denver Broncos back in the early 90s, and I think he was picked in 1989. Marlon Humphrey also is a track star. So the kid can run. He's big. He's almost 200 pounds and 6'1", and he was productive last year. He had 8 pass breakups. So he's a starting caliber cornerback, and I think that there will be teams, there is a chance that as a redshirt sophomore that he could declare.
Eddie Jackson is a safety. I've seen mixed opinions on him. I'll say this. I haven't been super enthralled by the play of Alabama secondary in the NFL. What are your thoughts?
I'm not blown away by Eddie Jackson, and I wasn't blown away by Clinton Dix a couple years ago, but I thought he was a better player than Eddie Jackson. And then Eddie Jackson has a torn ACL in his history. But he tore his ACL in the spring of 2014, and then he came back and played 11 games that year. So you've got the injury history, but then you have the toughness and the quick healing. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I put that as a red flag, but it might almost be viewed as a positive the way he responded and played, and he played all last year without incident. But he's also a guy who has experience playing safety and corner, so that could help his cause. 6 feet tall, 194 pounds, and he had 6 interceptions last year. And I know Seth and I talked about this by a text message a few months ago, and I think I tweeted about it, but the interceptions plus pass breakups is really big in scouting circles, in particular with Bill Belichick and his disciples. So always keep an eye on that. If you're looking at defensive backs, I know people hate to box score scout, but I don't really think there's anything wrong with it as long as you're watching the tape as well. Looks like Seth stepped away, so we'll keep moving. Cameron Robinson is a junior offensive lineman, and he was arrested for marijuana possession and possession of a stolen firearm. This was in his hometown this past May. The DA famously opted not to prosecute Robinson and his teammate because he didn't want to ruin their football careers. It was an astonishing admission by a district attorney. Robinson is projected. He is the left tackle for Alabama. I think many people are projecting him as a potential top 10 pick, and we know that Alabama offensive linemen have been coveted over the years, even if they might be kind of slow, or even in like Cyrus Kwanjo's case, have a degenerative arthritic condition. He still ends up going on day 2. It's kind of a mixed bag with these guys, but I think a lot of people are high on Cameron Robinson. I'm going to skip over Darius Stewart. He's a redshirt junior, and he did have 63 catches last year. But I want to talk about Tim Williams, who's an edge player. He's a linebacker size, 6'4", 237 pounds. He had 12 sacks, or he had 10 and a half sacks, last year among his 19 tackles. So this is kind of an all-or-nothing player. I feel like he's a guy who goes out there and he has one job. It's pass rush. And at 237 pounds, I'm not sure how that translates. He's going to need to be able to move off the ball, off the line of scrimmage, to be a high pick. He is a senior, and he is a 4-year senior. So he's kind of a mystery man to me because I don't really know how he projects at the next level. I think he's going to have to play off the ball, and I haven't really seen him do that. So people are very high on his pass rush moves, but I am so gun shy about really lightweight pass rushers ever since Barkevius Mingo burned, I think, all of us. So moving on, we're going to look at Arkansas, and Arkansas has a player in Dan Skipper, who's an offensive lineman. He's listed at 6'10", and he has 34 career starts. Dan Skipper has played guard, and he's played both offensive tackle spots. But what I think is really interesting about this guy, because he's so tall, they throw him on the kick team, and he has blocked 5 kicks in his 3 seasons. So this is a senior offensive lineman. I'm not sure how successful guys that are over 6'8", 6'7", 6'8" do as offensive linemen, but Dan Skipper at 6'10", having blocked 5 kicks in his career, is really noteworthy. And, at the very least, if you draft a guy like this who you think has some offensive line versatility and he can play on special teams and contribute. So that's a guy that I thought was noteworthy.
And, the thing with a guy like Skipper at 6'10" is it's always fun to try something and to see how things work out. It may not work out, but in the 7th round, you take a flyer and you like you said, you put him on, field goal block team, and he blocks, 1 field goal or 2 field goals a year. That's a huge game changer right there. So
if you get the kicker thinking about it, even then, that's kind of a game changer, because you can maybe cause some shanks. And the thing is, I think you said seventh round, and I think that's probably, from what I've seen of Skipper as an offensive lineman, I don't think he's a high round pick. He did strike me as like a day 3 pick. And again, I worry about the flexibility of guys that are that tall. I think there's kind of like NFL teams will like an offensive tackle that's 6'5", 6'6", but then I think you get into the law of diminishing returns when you get into 6'8", 6'9". Not everybody's Jonathan Ogden.
Right, and Ogden was a unique Hall of Fame player. So from there, another interesting player, and I'm interested in him because I'm always interested in edge players. Dietrich Wise Jr., an edge. He he's got a medical red shirt, so he is like a 5th-year senior. The issue with him is he just hasn't been productive, but he's got the size at 6'5", 273. So you want to see a little bit of production from these guys, especially if they're wanting to transition to edge in the NFL. Do you think Dietrich is going to have to kick down in the NFL, or what do you think he can do?
No, I think he's size-wise, he's similar to like an Emmanuel Ogbah, who was taken in the 2nd round. And in fact, Cleveland intended to play him at linebacker. They're playing him at some 5 tech right now, but I think his future is going to be at linebacker for Ray Horton. Wise is interesting because he didn't have any production until last year, and then he had 8 sacks. And I know this is another guy that our buddy Justice has looked at, and I think he was pleasantly surprised. He's another player who his father was a former NFL draft pick and who also spent time in the CFL and Arena League. So he's got that pedigree. And guys that have played in the NFL, they know people, and their sons tend to get drafted. So I think Wise, when we talk about his injury history, he had some injury history in his freshman year, but it didn't end up hurting him later on in his career. He still played 38 games. So we look at the injury history here, and we can say that it's kind of in the past, and anything that happens now is kind of like a clean slate for him.
Auburn has a couple defensive linemen and defensive backs that are really interesting. Montravius Adams, 6'4", 310, not a pocket pusher, but more of a pocket collapser. What do you think? Is Adams a guy that in today's NFL will draw the attention as, that run-stopping interior defensive lineman, or is he going to be a guy that goes in, on day 2 because he doesn't offer enough up the middle?
To me, he's not a first-rounder, and the thing was I was kind of disappointed because looking at his sophomore tape, I thought that he had a chance to become a first-rounder. I thought that he was going to take that step, and he didn't do it. I thought they kind of took a step back. The whole Auburn team disappointed me last year. And it's not that Adams is not a good player. I think he still has a chance to elevate his stock. But to me, he's not a first-rounder right now. And, you look at the production, the 2.5 sacks, 6 hurries from the middle. He was kind of a pile jumper as a defensive lineman. Only 16 solo tackles the entire year, and he played every game. So it's you see a guy who's kind of a space eater at this point, and you like him to use his gifts. He was a 5-star recruit, and I don't feel like he's lived up to his potential.
From there, I really like Carl Lawson off the edge. I was surprised.
You've seen him play?
Well, a little bit. But, I mean, I like the fact that he has done well when he's on the field. The problem is, as you said, he sat out 14 with the torn ACL. He missed a lot of games after he got hurt in the season opener. But he's a guy that, when he's on, he looks like a guy that could be special. But he's not on nearly enough. And that was the point I wanted to get to. if Lawson has a big year, like 10 plus sacks, is he going to get looked at as a first rounder, and are we going to ignore the first 21 games, or like what do you think here? Because I mean, 5 career sacks isn't a ton, but if he goes from 5 to 16 or 17
Mm-hmm.
in his career, that's not bad production for a guy that was injured a lot. But that's what bothers me more than anything is this guy's an athletic weapon, and how much of that does he have left?
Yeah, and he's another player who, as I mentioned before, he's 6'2", so you're going to wonder about his arm length. We saw this with Noah Spence, where he kind of came in a little bit short on the arm length, and that hurt him in some people's eyes. With Lawson, he's got the injury history, and then just kind of like just imaginary production. Like last year, he had 1 sack, and they credited him with 11 hurries. Well, that's great. That's wonderful, but you're not closing it out, and he's got to finish this out. If he does have a big season where he has like 12 or 13 sacks this year, makes first team all SEC, then yeah, I absolutely think he can be drafted in the first round. Would I support that? I'm not sure. Probably would not, because of all the other things, all the other pieces of the puzzle. But could he go in the first round? Absolutely, because NFL teams seem to have very short memories. A guy like Kevin Dodd last year almost got into the first round despite being buried on the depth chart at Clemson for a couple years and not being a particularly great athlete. So the potential's there. It's just that Lawson, I can feel like he's a guy I'm not going to support unless I really see something. And even then, I'm going to be very skeptical because of the injury history.
You got anything else from the SEC or from Auburn you want to hit on?
No, we can move on to Florida.
All right, Florida has some interesting guys in the secondary. And then I'm always interested in Florida skill players because they've been so – not the skill players, but the coaching has been so bad. DeAndre Goolsby is another one of those guys that intrigues me because he's a guy that was supposed to be kind of the next move guy for this Florida offense. And he really, I mean, he's got okay production, but he really hasn't put it together yet. And it's, again, I don't fault many of these Florida guys for what they've done so far. How big is this first year with Mark Richt, though?
Oh, no, you're thinking of this. This is still with Jimmy McElwain. He's coaching Florida.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah. My bad. I'm thinking Miami. Anyways, yeah.
How big Florida is it? Schools mixed up. But, yeah, no, yeah. I think Goolsby, PFF is high on him already. I mean, at least PFF Steve thinks that he's going to make the jump this year. And I think there's good reason to believe that. But because you see a player who had 17 catches last year, but who averaged 16 yards a catch on those plays. But that was it. That's it. He is a complete.
That's his whole career, all 21
exactly.
Games. That's it. And that's why I said, I got mixed up. I'm sorry. I apologize. I knew I was talking about their terrible coach before that in defensive coordinator. Now,
right.
But,
Will Muschamp was
Will Muschamp. But now, I got Will Muschamp and Al Golden, and their terrible coaching jobs switched up. But anyways,
it's easy to mix those two guys up because they both wore like white shirts that were loosely tucked in and just looked like sweaty messes by about midway through the first quarter of every game.
But yeah, it still stands. Goolsby needs to have a second productive year in McElwain's offense and under Florida. But I saw today a Florida fan was very disappointed with their decision on who's going to be their QB. Del Rio's kid, right?
Right. Luke Del Rio, I think. And he's a transfer student, I think a redshirt sophomore. But I don't think that was a surprise. It wasn't a surprise to me. That's kind of been the report that's trickled out of Florida this whole time. And the thing is, what I would tell Florida fans, and one of my good friends is a Florida fan, and what I tell him is, I think you can trust Jimmy McElwain when it comes to quarterbacks. I think look at what he did with Garrett Grayson, who I thought ended up being a pretty solid NFL prospect and who has shown some flashes in Saints camp this offseason to the point where they're at least.
Isn't he the number 2 now?
I'm not sure about that because they still have Luke McCown, but I think Grayson would be a number 2 on a lot of teams because you look at other teams that have, like, Detroit has Dan Orlovsky at number 2, right? I mean, Garrett Grayson, I think, at least projects to a long-term backup, and this is a guy that kind of, under Jimmy McElwain, he really thrived. So I don't know what to expect from Luke Del Rio, but I think that Jimmy McElwain's going to get better quarterback play than he got out of his team last year. So that does give me hope. I'm kind of in agreement with PFF Steve that DeAndre Goolsby is going to have an uptick. I'm not sure that he's just going to become this, first-team SEC player and declare for the draft as a true junior. That's a big leap to make from 17 career receptions.
Yeah, and that's where I'm interested in him because he's a junior and he's a true junior.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, he
was only a 3-star recruit. It's not like this guy was a world beater coming out of high school.
From there, I love their secondary. Marcus May. You want to say one thing Muschamp did well? He got these guys stocked in terms of defensive talent in the secondary. Marcus May and Jalen Tabor. May is going to have to go out, and he's had some injury / off the field issues. But Tabor, could he be as good as Vernon Hargreaves?
Some people already are saying that he is better than, or that he was better than Vernon Hargreaves last year. And Tabor had 4 interceptions and 14 pass breakups. So when I talk about that combined number, that's a very good number, 18. And he had 2 defensive touchdowns too. I mean, the guy's a baller. He's 6 feet, 190 pounds. But the other thing is he's had 2 suspensions now too. He was suspended last year for the Tennessee game because apparently he refused to or skipped a drug test, which is an automatic suspension, kind of like if you got pulled over for suspicion of DUI and refused a breathalyzer. It doesn't look good for you. And now Tabor is suspended, I think, for the opener this year because of some kind of violation of team rules. It's always the mysterious violation of team rules, but when you have a guy who's already been suspended for a reason, then you're going to automatically jump to the conclusion that it's that same reason again, or at least an associated reason. So we've got to look for this guy. I think Seth and I have made it pretty clear that on this show we're not particularly worried about people who've had problems with 1 or 2 marijuana tests, something like that. But we see how it does come up to haunt teams. Randy Gregory, who's a player I was very high on, is currently suspended. Josh Gordon, who had a fantastic sophomore season at the NFL level, has been suspended multiple times. So we see that it does trickle into the NFL.
Yeah, it does, and it's disappointing to see. Anybody else in Florida you want to touch on real quick?
Jared Davis, just so we touch on him, because he was one of Bruce Feldman's freaks. And I always like to look closely at Bruce Feldman, a great college football writer. Every year he comes out with the freak list, and he talks about guys who are athletic, like just super athletes at the college level. Jared Davis is a senior linebacker, and I think he's going to be very closely looked at for guys looking at off-the-ball linebackers. He did have a knee issue in 2014 with a torn meniscus, and we saw that really damage a guy like Miles Jack last year, where he had that meniscus issue and he falls to the second round. So keep an eye on that. Jared Davis was pretty productive in the inside as a off-ball linebacker, 11 tackles for loss and 4 pass breakups. So he can run, he can cover, and he can play the run. But you're a little worried about that knee, especially when you talk about a guy who's a really good athlete. You hope that it doesn't sap any of that athleticism.
Yeah, and we've talked about cartilage and why it's worse.
Right, in many ways worse than the ligament.
Georgia, I'm gonna skip my tight end love here with Jeb Blazevich.
He's only a junior. Honestly, I don't expect him to declare really.
Honestly, I don't know what to expect with Georgia. Do you?
Not really. I mean, new coaching staff, so it's kind of a mystery, and we've seen them be a perennial double-digit win team, but then lose disappointing games. So I really don't know what to expect from them. And then we have their star running back, Nick Chubb, who some people are still putting him as basically running back one in this upcoming draft, despite the fact that he had a gruesome knee injury that caused him to miss the final 7 games of the year. And we really don't know what we're getting coming back from Chubb.
Yeah, and then you have do they pronounce it Sonny Michael?
I always said Sony, but that's because it's spelled just like the TV.
But Michael and Chubb is an interesting 1-2 punch, and I like both of them quite a bit. The question I have is simply, do they both declare after this year? Like, will one of them want to be, like, for Chubb, does he need 2 years to show that his knee is healthy? For Michael, does he need, if Chubb declares, does he need 1 year to be the guy in an offense, or do they both declare and keep, kind of moving on? I can't pick one or the other that I like better, but I do like both of them. I think they're nice players.
I think Chubb, if he's healthy and if we see him rebound, to me he's clearly the better of the two, because he's bigger and he's just put together just insane production. He was averaging over 8 yards a carry when he got hurt last year, and over 7 yards a carry in his career. And he can also catch the ball. He's got 22 receptions in 19 games. Sony, this guy was really good after Chubb got hurt last year. 1,161 yards, 5.3 yards per carry is it's just kind of average for me. I know it's a tough conference, but you've seen his teammate do much better than that by about 2.5 yards better than that. So you wonder about that. I don't want to put too much weight in one statistic, but that would be something that I would want him to improve on. And then he suffered a broken arm in an ATV accident on 4th of July weekend, and we don't know if he's going to be healthy for the start of the year. I don't think that's the type of injury that's going to linger or cause problems in the future, but it delays his start to the season at all. Georgia could be starting the season with their third-string running back, and then you really don't know what to expect. And then when are these guys going to come back and get worked into the rotation?
Well, and he's probably still one of the better players in the country too.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Sonny Michael can start. And guys, if we are pronouncing his name wrong, please give us hell and tweet to us and let us know what the correct pronunciation. But I think he can be a starter for a lot of teams. But on Georgia, to me, he's the clear number 2.
Anybody else on Georgia you want to mention?
No, I think we can move on for the sake of time.
Okay, and we need to hit on another hot take in this. The reason we're hitting on this one is because it has to do with Georgia and their running backs. At Life's Your Cup is he kind of does a lot of like dynasty. Don't you feel like that would be kind of what his wheelhouse would niche, if so to speak?
Right, dynasty fantasy, and going so far as to examine guys that are recruits, true freshmen, even something that we don't really touch on this show.
He still has Chubb as his number 1 running back, and you talked about this a little bit, but didn't mention who it was. Chubb could definitely be the guy. He could definitely work his way back into that mix. But don't you want to at least see him on the field? Like I do. And I had the same thing with Gurley. Like, I loved Gurley. I thought he was hands down the best running back, but I don't, I can't call a guy whose knee exploded on live TV, running back 1 without having seen him move, in after surgery.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what I was saying. I can't put Nick Chubb number 1 overall when I don't know if his knee is intact or if he's even healthy for the start of the season. And this is a good segue into our next team, which is going to be LSU, because not only does he have Nick Chubb as number 1A, he has Bo Scarborough, who's a redshirt sophomore, or I think a third-year sophomore. Maybe he went to prep school, but for Alabama, a guy I didn't even profile on my preview because he has like 18 career carries, and he's a complete unknown to me. He's got him number 3 ahead of Samaje Perine, who we talked about, I think, a couple weeks ago, and Elijah Hood, who we talked about last week. And then all the way down here at number 11 is Leonard Fournette, who was in the driver's seat for the Heisman Trophy well into last season, and a player that I think, Seth, is being overly criticized at this point, picked apart, kind of like what we saw with Derrick Henry. I'm not comparing the two.
Derrick Henry in terms of coverage.
Yeah, it's incredible what we've seen as far as Leonard Fournette being picked apart by some of these analysts on Twitter when he had almost 2,000 yards rushing and over 6.5 yards a carry and 22 touchdowns in the SEC, what many people acknowledge as the best conference in college football, and with a putrid, awful passing attack.
And the thing with like Fournette is, I think he was so overhyped at times coming out. I mean, we had last year, we made fun of people that were saying, you know, he just needs to sit out.
Right.
Well, like
people are still saying that, by the way.
Yeah, but and we'll still make fun of him. But like the thing is, you're talking about a guy that we don't even know if is going to go in the first round. Like, I think he's a very, very good running back. You and I both think he's an excellent running back. I don't think he's as good as Ezekiel Elliott was.
No, I agree with that, and
that's not a shot.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that he's better than Derrick Henry. We were big supporters of Derrick Henry on the show. We talked about Derrick Henry as being a day 2 guy, a high second-round pick, which is where he went. But I do think Fournette is in that area. You know, I think at the very least he's a high day 2 guy. And, I mean, you cannot deny this production. This is a guy who one of my favorite clips on Fournette is him returning a kickoff for a touchdown as a freshman. And you just see that speed. And I think he's going to, much like Derrick Henry, I think he's going to test very fast for his weight. And that's very valuable at the NFL level, I feel like. I think that's indicative of burst and breakaway speed. And when we had Eric Stoner on talking about big backs with balance, we see guys with that profile have extreme value at the NFL level, more so than what Draft Twitter values. So when Draft Twitter is valuing a Dalvin Cook over a Leonard Fournette, all things being equal, not even counting Dalvin Cook's off the field or injury history, I still think they're shortchanging Leonard Fournette. I think that he's a player who is very much still in the driver's seat for top running back to be selected this coming year. Now, when we talk about other guys from LSU, I wanted to talk about Traven Doral, the receiver, who is a fifth-year senior. And Doral is a guy who missed all of 2012 with a meniscus injury, so that would have been his freshman year. He was redshirted at that point. He's had some injury issues. He tore a hamstring against Ole Miss last November, and he sat out the last 2 games of the year. So you're worried. We're going to worry about this guy's lower body because we know that meniscus injuries can lead to other problems, and then he has that muscle tear. But Doral is a really good player. He's a big play receiver, averaged almost 20 yards per catch. He doesn't have a high volume because, as we mentioned, LSU's quarterback situation has been complete garbage the last couple of years. And Doral is also going to be a 24-year-old rookie when he does come out. So I don't expect that Traven Doral is going to be a top 2-round pick or anything like that. But I do think he can get into the 3rd round. One of the things we talk so much about negative off the field red flags with these guys. Traven Durrell and his cousin helped rescue a woman from an overturned car last summer. They saw somebody in distress and they pulled over their car and they aided that person. And I think that by all accounts, this is a guy who's a really good citizen and also a very good player. He doesn't have a great prospect profile because of these injuries and because of his age. But as a player, looking at on field and looking at character, he's a prospect that somebody's going to fall in love with, I think.
And then Malachi Dupree is the other wide receiver, and he's the one that's a little more hyped at 6'3", 190.
We have a take on this guy, right?
What is your take on him first, though?
Well, my take is that he's a very good prospect, but as a true sophomore to have 43 catches and average over 16 yards a catch, 6 touchdowns, again, in this passing offense, I think those are very strong numbers. And at 6'3", he's a little bit thin for me. I would like to see a guy a little heavier at 6'3". He's a skinny guy, but I think that he came in with pedigree, 5-star recruit, and I don't think he's disappointed to this point. He's been a big play guy for them, and he scored 11 touchdowns in 2 years in what's at we could generously call it a middling offense as far as passing, but definitely a run-heavy offense.
Yeah, and I wanted to hit on 2 of these defensive players real quick. Jamal Adams is another one of these bigger safety prospects, 6'1", 211. He was a freshman All-American, then second team All-SEC in 15. What is he going to be? Another one of these guys that gets kind of picked up to be a in the box safety?
I don't know. I think Jamal Adams, I think he's better than that. I think he's a little bit better than that. I think he's a guy who's shown to play the ball, and I don't think he's like oversized too much. But I thought that about Deone Buchanan, who has been kind of converted to that hybrid box linebacker role. And so I think it just depends where this guy goes. But I think it speaks to Jamal Adams. He's a very, very good player, and I think he's going to be a high draft pick if he decides to declare. He's a true junior. But I think he is a player that is going to pique the interest. From what I've seen of Jamal Adams, I think I like him better than a guy like Eric Reed, who went in the first round a couple of years ago. To me, Adams is a better player. He's a better tackler, and I think he's got better instincts for the ball.
Not going to go through all of them, but I think Tre'Davious White, Devon Godshoe, and Kendall Beckwith all deserve mentioning because those are all very talented defensive players, and LSU still hangs their hat on their defensive ability. So I think, those are all guys that are going to be looked at as day 1 and 2 picks, barring, injuries.
We also have Ethan, I think it's Posich.
Yeah,
He's an offensive lineman
he's played everywhere on their offensive line.
Right guard and center, which is unusual for a 6'7", 309-pounder. But we saw Graham Glasgow from Michigan go in the 3rd round last year. He was a tall center who I think is being converted to guard. So Ethan Posich, I think, will ultimately play guard in the NFL. But I think there were some people who thought he could have declared last year, and he came back. So I think there are people that are going to be high on him, and he's projecting right now to be probably a day 2 pick.
And then Missouri or anybody else, or sorry, Mississippi State. Anybody else with LSU you want to mention?
No, we can move on.
All right, Mississippi State. I only have Fred Ross, wide receiver, another big guy, 6'2", 207 pounds. He's more of the size that you like. I'm interested in him to see what he does this year without Dak Prescott, who Dak Prescott has looked really nice in Cowboys camp. So, what does he do without a talented quarterback?
Yeah, I don't know. I still think that they're going to operate such that they're going to try and get these receivers involved. So I think Fred Ross, who had 88 catches last year, a lot of that was short area stuff, and it really brought his yards per per catch down, but at 6'2", 207, he is big. He's a big bodied guy, and I think he's a little bit underrated right now. And I think that he has a chance. He's a senior receiver, and I think he has a chance to be one of the higher senior receivers drafted. I think he has a chance to be a day 2 guy. We're probably looking at a 3rd round, 4th round type of player right now.
Missouri has one, front 7 player. They always seem to have one front 7 player. Charles Harris.
Yeah.
The classic Mizzou player, but he's not as productive as the other ones. And to me, that's a red flag, because that's one thing Mizzou has is high level of productivity. And he did have 7 sacks last year, but I can't decide if he's going to be another one of these Mizzou, linemen, or sorry, not linemen, but defensive front 7 guys that comes in and makes an impact in the NFL, or if he just happens to be the best of a semi-bad batch.
I kind of think it's the latter. I'm not taking away from this guy as a player, but he was not highly recruited. He is a kind of a tweener type of player. He is 6'3", 255. He's also a redshirt junior, so we don't know. He could end up going back, and he had a very good year last year. But I don't think he's on par with like a Michael Sam, and I don't think he's on par with the guys that went later, and he's definitely not on par with like the Marcus Golden or the guys. Who's the guy who Denver took? I'm kicking myself.
Oh, Shane Ray.
Right. Jeez. You can all unfollow me for that. But no, he's not on par with those guys.
I got the Florida coach wrong, so I mean, it's late.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's not Shane Ray. He's not Marcus Golden. He's not even Michael Sam to me. But he doesn't have to declare, and he's got a chance to improve his stock. To me, Missouri is not a really fun team to watch. So I confess I haven't spent a ton of time on Harris, but I just don't. He doesn't really stack up to me from what I've seen to the other guys that preceded him.
Moving on to Ole Miss.
Hot take time.
Yeah, and they have quite the plethora of talent. We'll start with the quarterback, Chad Kelly.
Yeah, please.
And this take comes to us from Draft Dr. Phil at FUL Phil O. That's FULPHILO. FYI, quarterback Chad Kelly of Ole Miss is my number 1 ranked quarterback going into the draft. I mean, I like Chad Kelly. He's a decent player.
You like him in what respect? I mean,
like in the respect of like a developmental quarterback, not number 1 quarterback in a draft.
No, this guy he's got so many red flags for a quarterback. I mean, for one thing, he has 13 FBS starts, which I think all came last year, right? Or maybe all but one came last year. And he was dismissed from Clemson. He was also arrested in December of 2014. He also fumbled 9 times last year. He's kind of just one of those guys. He's such a gambler, right? As a quarterback, he's just such a gambler, which we've seen at Ole Miss in the past with guys like Bo Wallace. So, Chad Kelly had some big games, and he can run, he can move, and he's got a good arm. But I think when people look at quarterback, we talked about this on the show many, many times, especially leading up to this past draft, how the interview process is so crucial when it comes to quarterbacks. And that's how you get a guy like Carson Wentz drafted 2nd overall, even though he has no business going that high, Seth. But Chad Kelly is a guy who's been arrested, kicked out of the school. He spent time at Last Chance U, and he is a rapper named Swag. I just do not see not only is he not the best quarterback in this draft, I think he has work to do to convince teams that he's draft worthy, because he has done a lot of things that people do not want in their quarterback. And the taste of Johnny Manziel is still fresh in the NFL's mouth right now. They took a chance on – Cleveland Browns took a chance on Johnny Manziel, and this guy had fewer suspensions and fewer dismissals than Chad Kelly, and he still flamed out royally. So this is just – what a take when you have a player like Deshaun Watson who took Clemson to the national championship game and really had them in the game against a very good and superior Alabama team. It's just phenomenal to me. This is a great take. This is my favorite hot take of the day.
Defensively, Tony Bridges is a cornerback, JUCO transfer. Played well last year, 3 interceptions, 9 pass breakups. We talked about that last week, how important the pass breakup numbers are to NFL teams like New England. Does he need to measure in at a legit 6 feet to be, considered a day 2 type cornerback?
Yeah, I don't think Tony is a day 2 guy. He's an older prospect. He's going to be 24. He's a JUCO guy. Had a solid year, and I don't think he's going to measure a clean 6 feet. So I think he's going to be a late round player, but I think he is a draftable player, as from what I've seen so far. Tony Connor is the probably the big name guy in their secondary, but he's built like a linebacker, and he is really one of those true hybrid type of players. But then he had 2 surgeries last year on a meniscus, and he missed a lot of time, I think 8 games. So Connor was a player as a freshman. I think people were really high on him. And now as a senior, he's got injury red flags, and he's an older guy too. He'll be 24. So that's their secondary. I think we should talk about Evan Ingram, who is listed as tight end in air quotes.
What is the love affair with Ingram? I like him. Like, he's a nice player, but like, where does he play in the NFL? Is he he's an H-back, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think people want to put him. Everybody, when they see a small tight end, they go, "Well, we'll put him in the Aaron Hernandez role," as if that's like a prominent role throughout all of NFL football, and we know that it's not. And we also know that NFL teams in recent years have been mining either undrafted free agency or lower tier free agency to pick up tight ends. And I use the examples of Larry Donnell and Will Tye for the New York Giants, Gary Barnidge for the Cleveland Browns. Just a couple examples of teams mining lower tier free agency, because we also seen teams draft tight ends in the later rounds, like Nick Casa or Vance McDonald, and they really haven't amounted to much, at least at this point in their careers. So it's Evan Ingram would have to run a sub 4.6, I think, and maybe be projected to be a wide receiver, a big slot. He's interesting because he's very productive and he's a decent player.
Extremely.
But extremely productive for a tight end, but not for a guy built 6'3", 227 pounds. He's not. Only 2 touchdowns last year, and he missed 5 games last year with an ankle sprain. Or no, I'm sorry, that was as a freshman. But he's played 34 games, but only the 7 touchdowns. And this is an offense where they had a quarterback throw for over 4,000 yards. So where is the love coming from for Evan Ingram? I think he's a tweener, and I think that is valued a lot more on Twitter than it is in the NFL.
And then they have 2 big wide receiver prospects. We won't go deep into them, but Quincy Adeboyejo and
Demarie Stringfellow. What a great name.
Yeah. But, I mean, 6'3", 195, and 6'2", 211. Mm-hmm. Stringfellow has some off-the-field history that he's going to have to answer for, and he hasn't been overly productive throughout his career. But he is a very talented player. Quincy, I'm not even going to try the last name again. Again, you talk about production. I know they had Laquan Treadwell, but he was out for some time. And a lot of these guys have similar numbers. Quincy put up 38 catches for 600 yards and 7 touchdowns. You had, Evan Ingram, which talked about 38 catches, only 2 touchdowns. So are these wide receivers their target in the red zone? And this goes back to the question about Ingram and whether or not he's the type of guy that needs to be being talked up and hyped up this much. South Carolina, how the mighty have fallen.
Do we have anybody from there?
Darius English, he's their redshirt senior edge player. Kind of looks in terms of size like Shaquille Riddick was, 6'6", but only 245 pounds at 6'6". He's going to have to put on some weight he
was a backup last year as a fourth-year junior. So
fourth-year junior, and then again, what do you say about where South Carolina has gone from here? Or from where they were 3 or 4 years ago. It's kind of crazy. Tennessee, they have a lot of nice players. We're not going to hit them all, but I think we need to start with Derek Barnett. He's a guy you want to talk about production, 26 game, 20 sacks. That's the type of production you want to see in terms of an edge player. Can Barnett be, that versatile edge that can go anywhere, or do you see him as, being pigeonholed in a 4-3 or a 3-4?
To me, I think he's a player that is versatile, but this brings us to one of our probably one of our last hot takes from John Ledyard at Ledyard NFL Draft, and he's writing now for Inside the Pylon at ITP. I think it's at IT Pylon on Twitter. John said, not sure if this is a hot take or not right now. John, it is. But Dwayne Smoot is over Derek Barnett. It's not particularly close. It's not that Dwayne Smoot over Barnett to me is a hot take. It's that it's not particularly close. And a lot of people say that maybe I think to add some heat, to add some pepper to the take. How can it not be close? He's got the Tennessee freshman record for sacks and tackles for loss. This is a player who has 20 sacks, 33 tackles for loss in 26 games. He does have a shoulder injury, which we saw that kind of hurt Shaq Lawson. But Derek Barnett is to me, he's a very good player, and I think he's already getting picked apart too. He's more productive than a couple of guys we mentioned at Alabama. I don't know if that makes him a better prospect. Time will tell. But I think Derek Barnett has been ticketed for stardom, or at least early, late day 1, early day 2 type of player at the very least since he was recruited. And he's on track to do that. The way he's produced in the toughest conference in football is a plus. And we can nitpick the way he bends the edge or whatever. I know people did that with Dante Fowler, and he ended up going in the top 5. So I think Barnett's going to be a high draft pick, and I do think he will declare.
Evan Berry's a nice safety prospect, if not a little undersized at only 5'11".
He's an awesome kick return prospect.
Yeah. Is he going to be a guy – that's what was going to be my question. Is he going to be a guy that gets a look as a safety coming out, or is he going to make it in the NFL to start with as a kick returner and then, kind of progress from there?
Evan Berry, younger brother of Eric Berry from the Saints. I think to me, he's just an unknown as a defensive player. Only 18 tackles last year. He hasn't been a prominent defensive player, but he has been a fantastic kick returner. Averaged almost 40 yards per kick return last year and 3 touchdowns. Problem with fantastic kick returners is that they're being phased out because of the stupid rules in the NFL. They're fake dedication to safety, where they eliminate one of the more exciting plays of the game. I understand that they're trying to eliminate concussions, but they're also eliminating jobs. And some guys are just phenomenal kick returners and not much else. And they don't have the opportunity that they used to. It's really unfortunate to me as a fan of watching the NFL.
I want to stay with their defense real quick and jump down to Jalen Reeves-Maybin. You want to talk about undersized and, question marks of the way this kid plays. I actually talked to a couple buddies about him the other night. His instincts in lateral movement are special, but he's 6 foot tall and 230 pounds. Is this going to hurt him in the NFL process?
Yeah, for sure it's going to hurt him unless he runs like a 4.4, and I don't think he will.
Yeah, I saw he was like a 4.62 guy at best, and it's crazy.
Yeah, he's a good player. He has a little bit of an injury history, but it hasn't really knocked him out of any games. But I think that, his problem is shoulder. And I think shoulder is kind of almost like the new knee, because guys have to use their shoulders in tackling. And especially for defensive players, when they've had that history of shoulder injuries. And again, we've seen it with Shaq Lawson, where now he's going to miss the early part of his rookie year at the least. So a player even smaller than that guys can tough through it. We've seen players tough through it. I saw Barkevious Mingo play an entire year with a shoulder harness, but he didn't play particularly well, and he didn't make a ton of impact. And I worry about a small linebacker to begin with. It's not that you're totally right. Reeves-Maybin is a very exciting player, and he can make some very exciting plays at the college level, but I just worry about a guy that small coming in with shoulder history. And, we talked about this with, I think it was Arthur Brown also had shoulder issues coming in, and he's just kind of been an invisible man for 4 years.
Offensively, Tennessee has a lot of talent. Put it together yet. Josh Dobbs is an intriguing, if underwhelming, quarterback prospect. He's right at 60% career, 26 touchdowns, only 17 interceptions, but 20 rushing touchdowns as well. Jalen Hurd is a massive running back, and I've seen people that criticized Derrick Henry for his running ability and size, that he was too big. Praise Jalen Hurd, which is interesting because Hurd is even bigger at 6'4", 240. And then they have Josh Malone, a former 5-star recruit who, again, with this offense under Dobbs, just is they kind of go the way Dobbs goes. If he's on that game, there's few in college football who are as fun to watch. But when he's not on, it's very frustrating, and it's just a frustrating prospect.
As a receiver, I don't even think I would want to go to Tennessee. We saw, Marquez North had a really successful freshman year and then kind of tailed off and ends up going undrafted. Malone, just 31 catches last year and only 2 touchdowns. Back to Hurd, it's really concerning to me that he doesn't average 5 yards per carry in college. He's at 4.6 career. I'm sorry, 4.7 career, 4.6 last year. This is with a running quarterback. This is with a Josh Dobbs who is very mobile and who can throw it a little bit. So you've got openings in that offense to make big plays. And I just don't – I think at times Hurd, who has posted a lot of videos of himself running very fast on a treadmill, I don't see that translating onto the field. It sometimes looks like he's running in sand. So I'm very skeptical of the Hurd love. I don't see him on par with Derrick Henry or Leonard Fournette. I don't see him as a day 1 or day 2 guy. And Seth, we should mention Cameron Sutton real quick. He led the team in passes defense as a freshman and a sophomore. He started every game of his college career. He's a cornerback, 38 games, 5'11", 186, kind of undersized. But I actually think this is a really good player. And if you can live with his size limitations, he's also a really good punt returner. Cameron Sutton's a player I really like for Tennessee.
Texas A&M has maybe the top prospect in the draft in Myles Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about production, 24 sacks in 25 games.
Yep.
He's had a concussion in the past, so that is, in this day and age of football, concerning. But he's a first-team All-American. He's been a sensation. He's been the best player on the field most of the time since he stepped on the field at Texas A&M. Is there much to say about Garrett at this point?
He's probably projected as the first non-quarterback that's going to be taken. If we assume that Deshaun Watson is going to be the number one overall pick, which I don't want to say assume, but I would guess that at this point, then Myles Garrett would be the number 2 pick, and you might flip-flop that depending on who gets the pick. But I think that 6'5", 260, he is built like a brick house. He is so lean and athletic. I just think this guy he's lived up to all the hype of his recruiting status, and he's their best player. I mean, there's not much more to say about him.
Offensively, I want to hit on a couple people, and then we can get back to Deshaun Hall. But offensively, Avery Genesee is a transfer from a junior college, and he's played left tackle. It seems like a Texas A&M offensive lineman gets drafted early every year. Is he the guy this year?
I don't think he's on par with those other guys from what I've seen, but he did come out of JUCO and he started every game, and he was a much better prospect coming out of JUCO than he was out of high school. So this is a player who went to the junior college level and really worked hard.
Better.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said about that. And when you do come in and you start, they had Jermaine Ifedi last year, who was a player I really liked as a prospect. And Texas A&M started Avery over Jermaine at that left tackle and had Ifedi staying at the right tackle. So there's something to be said about that too. He's a player that I think is kind of a mystery man because he only has those 13 starts. And I like offensive linemen that start for 3 years. And they're 3 or 4 years. And but I'm going to be monitoring this guy because I think he's a riser.
And then they have Devontae Speedy Noyle and Ricky Seals-Jones, 2 wide receiver prospects who've never lived up to the hype, the recruiting hype.
A lot of off-the-field stuff with those guys.
Yeah, and outside of Myles Garrett, that's kind of been and obviously Johnny Manziel, but that's kind of been the MO at Texas A&M since they moved to the SEC, isn't it?
Yeah. The shine has worn off of Kevin Sumlin since he first got there, and he had Manziel, and things were going pretty well as far as the win and loss record. And then it's maybe not so hype anymore. They're going to have Trevor Knight starting at quarterback. He's a redshirt senior, transfer from Oklahoma. I don't think he's a particularly good NFL prospect, but I think he's a decent college quarterback. And then Speedy Noyle has been suspended so many times. I've almost lost count of how many times he's been suspended. And then he's had other issues where he only had 21 catches last year. Josh Reynolds was probably their best receiver last year, and he's kind of the under the radar guy. So their offense, to me, they also have a running back, Ford, who transferred from Oklahoma after being suspended. So this is like the bad news bears of the SEC as far as or maybe it's more like the longest yard.
Exactly.
You got all these guys coming in, and they're good players, but you don't know how they're going to mesh together and if they're going to get their act together.
Deshaun Hall, is he a guy that is getting, fat off of, and not even that fat, to be honest, off of Myles Garrett, or is he a guy that could, continually, he's steadily improved every year at Texas A&M, but he's never actually been a player that makes you go, man, I want him on my team.
Yeah, it's kind of like Kevin Dodd last year. except that Hall did it as a junior, where Dodd kind of just came out of nowhere. It's his final college year. So Hall, you're going to look to see if he can at least duplicate what he did last year, which is get 7 sacks. But I think, definitely he's going to benefit from having one of the most dangerous pass rushers in college football across from him. So he's going to, much like Dodd did, he's going to get matchups against weaker offensive linemen and then even tight ends and running backs trying to chip him, and that's going to help. He needs to have a season like Dodd did. I'm critical of Dodd, but he had a big production season that bolted him into that second-round conversation. Hall can do that. He is kind of in the middle of the road right now, but at 6'6", 260, we like his build, and that length is excellent. You've got a very solid player, density and lengthwise, but you want to see him at least duplicate what he did last year if you're going to talk about him as even like a 3rd or 4th round pick.
Anybody else from Texas A&M you want to hit on?
No, I think we can pretty much wrap it up unless you want to talk about Vanderbilt, which I really don't.
All right, so Will Holden is their prospect. All right, well, that was
He's an offensive lineman, for those of you.
Oh, yes.
And if you want to know more about Will, right, if you want to know more about Will Holden or any of the other prospects from the SEC that we did not talk about, subscribe to the show, tweet, or send me an email of a picture, a screen cap of your subscription on iTunes or your follow on SoundCloud, and I will send you this full prospect preview. Again, over 350 players. We will talk next week, right, about the Group of 5, the conferences like the MAC and the Sun Belt and the Mountain West that do not have automatic bids into this college football playoff system that we have now, which I think is pretty exciting. Not the Group of 5 conferences, but the whole playoff system.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a fun time, even if Ohio State missed out last year to defend their championship. So
we'll be back this year.
That's right.
No,
yeah, exactly.
No, that brings me to, before we get out of here, one last hot take. I think it was Lance Zierlein tweeted something to the effect. I don't have the exact tweet in front of me, but he said
he needs one game at quarterback, he's going to take. Go ahead.
JT Barrett from Ohio State. And I love JT Barrett. I think he's one of my favorite college football players. He is fantastic in Urban Meyer's offense. But that is, I don't agree with that take at all. That is a hot take to me, because if I needed one player, one college football quarterback to take me down and win me a game with a couple minutes left, it's going to be Deshaun Watson. This guy was phenomenal as a sophomore. He took his team to the national championship game. And I understand that JT Barrett kind of did that his first year as a starter. But the difference is that JT Barrett, to me, is not the same player if he's not teamed up with Urban Meyer. So I've said before, and I'll say it again, JT Barrett to me is a 4-year college starting quarterback. I do think he is probably going to return for next season in 2017 and go into the 2018 draft. The only way he goes out is if he wins the Heisman and they win a championship. But I still don't think he's a first-round type of pick. Deshaun Watson, I do think he's a first-round pick, and I do think he will be the first quarterback taken in the 2017 draft.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Deshaun Watson's a special player, so I'm excited to see how this unfolds. We'll be back next week with the Group of 5 prospects. Make sure you subscribe and send us a screenshot so we can get you this fantastic prospect preview. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll be back with Justice Mosqueda, and we're going to preview just college football season, have some fun, get the band back together for one more run. So thanks for listening, everybody. Again, subscribe on iTunes and SoundCloud, and we'll be back next week.